Um, and some of you probably know that he was one of the first professors of wildlife management in the United States, and really the writings and things that he did in the first or the second quarter of the 20th century set the tone for a lot of the work that's been done over the decades on land conservation, wildlife management, and environmental ethics in the broadest sense. So I thought it would be interesting to read just a few short quotations from Leopold's works. His best known is the book of essays called A Sand County Almanac, but he did some other writings as well. So what I'm going to do, and again, I'm only going to read 3 of these, and they're short. I'm going to read one and just have time of silence, just to pause to think about those words. Then I'll read the next one and have another pause, and the third one. And then after the third one, I'll lead us in a short prayer. So here's the first citing from Aldo Leopold. He wrote once, "There are 2 things that interest me: the relation of people to each other and the relation of people to land. There are 2 things that interest me: the relation of people to each other and the relation of people to land." The second reading. We abuse land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect. Leopold raised his family in Wisconsin. He was born in Iowa and actually got his forestry degree at Yale, one of the first people to get that degree, and was in Arizona and New Mexico with the Forest Service for many years, but he taught at University of Wisconsin, and he and his family got a farm outside of town and spent years working with that. So this reference in the third reading here is to that farm. On this sand farm in Wisconsin, first worn out and then abandoned by our bigger society, we try to rebuild with shovel and axe what we are losing elsewhere. It is here that we seek and still find our meat from God.
Is that meat from God, like MEAT from
It
God?
is MEAT.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Let's pray together. God, on this beautiful autumn night, we thank you for this weather, for the glories of the fall season. We thank you that we can gather again, as tiring as it might be to see each other only on a computer screen, but we are grateful to have this much connection. So as we spend this time, we are grateful to talk, to listen, to think, to pray, to discern your wisdom, your purpose, and sense the energy that you would give us to be your people, not just for each other, but for all of your wonderful creation. As in all things, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, I have just a few questions on my mind for this topic, and I want to pose them one at a time and have you share memories, thoughts, and ideas on the topic of wildfires. Now, one of the reasons that I thought of Aldo Leopold for tonight is that he died in a wildfire. He actually died of a heart attack, but he was trying to fight a fire that had gotten started in a neighbor's property. So he died the way he lived, concerned about the natural world. So the first question I thought about is, since we're here in Western North Carolina, is what kinds of stories you have about wildfires. Maybe you've been here all of your life and know some of those stories. Maybe you've lived in other parts of the country and have some stories there too. But what experience, what memories do you have about fires and forest fires?
I got one, George. I was born and raised in Oregon and went to Oregon State. And my freshman and sophomore summers at Oregon State, I worked for the Forest Service out of Grants Pass in Southern Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a surveyor on a crew to build logging roads to do logging in 1964 and 5 or 3 and 4 or something like that. The fort I've only been involved in, I've got called up one time to fight a forest fire. And they brought the helicopter in, the 3 of us got on the helicopter and went in, and lightning had hit a tree, went down the tree and caught in the brush, a tremendous brush pile under the tree. So one of the things that we see the politicians kicking back and forth is what causes all the forest fires. The lightning hit the tree, but the fire was in the tremendous pile of brush underneath. And then in the year 27 to 2012, I worked with a gold mining operation working on permits in Eastern Oregon. And again, brush is a tremendous problem. But during that time, all of the restrictions that were placed on the access to the forest for logging, for cleaning brush, for any kind of activity, all of those activities are greatly restricted because of concern for the habitat for the spotted owl, for a particular salamander, for fish habitat, those kind of things. Very much of a concern to a lot of people in Oregon. And it pretty well shut down access to the forest. So the forest had no way to be cleaned or to make fire breaks with forest roads, those kind of things. And it doesn't surprise me that the problems that we're having now with forest fires is we don't really have good access to get into them when they do start. And when they do start, there's a tremendous pile of brush for them to burn. So that's part of my concern. And I weigh that with global warming. And we shut down the work on the West Coast in the US. I don't know that we helped global warming much because the lumber was coming from Canada and Australia. We shipped trees to Japan to be cut into lumber and sent back here. In the worldwide sense of things, I don't know that the shutdown on the West Coast, it has a lot to do with the forest fires we're having now. I don't know that helped the global warming situation much. It's quite a conundrum. You know, it's what is the right thing to do? We can go in and we can really clean up our own backyard and do everything right. But if that, whatever was wrong in our backyard that we corrected, if it moves to the next yard, you really haven't helped the neighborhood much. So somehow we have to have the world involved in changing technologies. Some of that's happening, but I think we probably all agree not near fast enough. That's what I have.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That definitely gives some of these current issues some personal context. And I have something in common with Bill, and that is I was born and raised in Oregon too. And I did not go to Oregon State because it was too close to home. but I've been on the campus many times. Well, thank you, Bill, for the story and for the reflections. What other stories do you have to share about forest fires and wildfires?
My daughter went to college at Westmont College, which is in Santa Barbara, California. She graduated in 2008. That campus is located in the hills outside of Santa Barbara on one of the estates there that somebody had donated to the college. So my understanding from what I was told is that nobody used to build up in those hills because it is so incredibly dry there. And there is a lot of underbrush there. Of course, the estates are very beautifully landscaped, but they've now populated those hills. It reminds me a little bit of, you know, complaining about the bears when we've moved into their territory. So in a sense, we've kind of moved into areas that normally people didn't live. And I think that in some ways that's sort of contributed to some of the issues. While she was there, there were two fires. The first one was started by somebody doing something they shouldn't do with fire up in the hills. It started a fire and they were keeping track of it, but it wasn't close to the campus. I got one of those texts in the middle of the night that no parent wants to ever get. Mom, my campus is on fire. And then I couldn't get a hold of her. But it came up over the ridge and they couldn't evacuate the campus. There wasn't enough time. So the only thing that they could do was evacuate all of the students to the gym, which was furthest away from the ridge. They lost several buildings, one of the dormitories, because they had a lot of faculty housing on the property because it was such a big piece of property. They lost all their faculty housing. They had 5 minutes to get to the gymnasium. My daughter had inhaled a lot of smoke trying to leave and couldn't breathe. And the doctor that was on staff there that was with her in the gym, what he needed to help her breathe was back on campus. So we had to take her back into the fire so that she could breathe, so he could get what he needed. So she has lung damage, she has asthma. She's very high risk for COVID right now, which makes me very nervous. And she has PTSD because of what she went through. So that was pretty intense. 2 years later, when I went out there for her graduation, another fire came while I was there. They had to move the graduation. They could not actually have it on campus. And I don't remember what started this one. Where I stayed on the northwest side of Santa Barbara, the road my motel was on that road was the dividing line between my side of the street was voluntary evacuation, across the street was mandatory evacuation. And all night long, the fire trucks, emergency vehicles were going back and forth and back and forth. And being in that was a very intense experience because you could see the fire that was very close, huge ash coming down everywhere. It was very, very hard to breathe. It was very intense. So because of those experiences, you know, hearing about everything that is happening, I feel like I have a little bit more personal appreciation for that. Fortunately, you know, nobody was hurt or killed, obviously my daughter's got some lung damage from that, but through the campus, but it was traumatic for all of those students and faculty. It was quite an experience. So that's something that I know I will never forget. And I have a lot of empathy for what people are going through.
Yeah, that's a scary story for sure. Wow. Well, thank you, Anna, for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's pretty vivid. Who else?
My story, George, is really more about a brush fire that got out of control rather than a forest fire. I was probably about 10 years old, and it was an experience that I haven't forgotten ever, and I'm now 79 years old. We were clearing land to build a house in Andrews, North Carolina, in a section known as Across the River. And we thought that we had put out the brush that we had raked up from one section of the place, part of the property where we were going to be building, and had not. And we turned to go back home and turned around and looked, and this fire was blazing and it was heading towards the forest behind our house at a very rapid pace. The wind was blowing. The field that it was traveling through had a lot of dry grasses on it, so it was just going so fast, it was terrifying. My parents sent me down to the neighbor's house to call for help, and I can remember praying so hard running down that dirt road to the neighbor's house. God, make the wind stop. God, make the wind stop, or we're not going to be able to. We're going to lose the whole forest behind our house. And the wind stopped. And I thought then, and I still think, that my prayer was answered. And it really made a big difference in my faith throughout my life. It doesn't mean I haven't ever had doubts. I have had many. But that experience was so special to me. And the second thing was that all of a sudden, people in that little community were out there battling that fire. People that I didn't even know. I can still remember seeing singed eyebrows from people that were right in the middle of that fire trying to get it under control, and they did. And so that was the other thing that I've never forgotten, was that power of community and love and an outpouring of concern that my family received from that experience. So not a forest fire, but certainly a fire that it affected my life in two very positive ways.
Yeah, if I,
How old were you, Catherine?
I'm not sure. I had to have been, I guess, 10 or 12, somewhere in that area.
Thanks.
fires don't have to be in forests to be threatening and scary and out of hand and everything else. Yeah. And that's quite a story too. Who else has a story?
I have a story, but it's very different. I was just thinking that I love fire, and my kids often accuse me of having been born like in caveman times or something, because I just have always enjoyed having a fireplace and building a fire. And I taught both my daughters to how to build a fire properly. And sometimes I think that wasn't such a great thing, because neither of their husbands know how to build a fire, and they're always embarrassed that only the women know how to build a fire. And when I moved to Montreat, I was just intent on having a house that had a fireplace. But the really strange thing is, I realized after a couple of years that it wasn't so fun to bring the wood in all by myself or make a fire all by myself, that a part of the fire that I really enjoyed was sharing the building and sharing, bringing in the wood and all of that. And since I live alone, I have converted to gas logs, and I just feel like I've sold my soul to the devil or something. But I like the fire look, but I don't like all of the work that goes with the fire. But I still enjoy somebody else building a fire. But I have just very, very happy memories of building fires with my dad growing up. And um, I've never really experienced anything like you all have described in terms of a destructive fire, except running into traffic and having to be diverted off I-95 South going to Jacksonville one time. A big fire that was crossing I-95 caused a 4-hour increase in my time because we had to go east toward Amelia Island and then south and then back west to get back on I-95. And that was a 4-hour detour. So that was not a lovely fire. I'm not sure what caused that fire, but it was huge.
Well, we can enjoy fire, like you say, in a very controlled way. And it's interesting, Priscilla, I'm thinking about this, in a sense, the similarities between what you were saying about wanting to share the fire with
Right.
others, and Catherine's comment about how, with the threat of the brush fire, how the community showed itself to really be community in a crisis. If anybody else has a story they'd like to share, I don't have anything as dramatic, but and maybe you don't either, but if you got something you want to share, you're welcome to do that.
Well, it hasn't been, I don't know how long ago it's been, but it's been in recent memory that there was a fire in the mountains above Montreat, between Ridgecrest and Montreat. And there was a lot of worry for a while for people that it would come over that mountain from Ridgecrest into Montreat. And smoke certainly did. And you could see from the corner of Montreat Road and Norfolk Road, you could see the burning in the hills to the east. So we've had recent experience with a fire in this very neighborhood. So
Yeah.
I live in.
And Kim, I remember.
If we ever have a serious one, I'm done for. So I'm just packing up my computer and leaving.
Mm-hmm.
At least you have your priorities straight, Cam.
Right. And I remember, Cam, after that fire, you could see the burned area from the interstate.
Right.
Yeah. So both my stories are not about the fire itself, but the aftermath of the fire. So, and I don't remember what year it was we had the fires here in Western North Carolina. But I was just having a lot of grief over these beautiful mountains that I love to hike in being burned. And people would say, oh, well, you know, they're going to grow back and they'll be beautiful and all that. And well, yeah, but right now they're not. And, you know, I have not been in that area to even see what it looks like, even now after, what is it, 4 years, 4 years. But a more, I don't know, recent, I don't know how to say this, but let me just tell you this story. So I'm with Presbyterians for Earth Care, and we hold the conference every other year. And in 2017, we were having a conference in Oregon at Manuka Camp and Conference Center, which is near Portland. And you know, we'd spent over a year planning this conference, and there were fires going on in that part of Oregon. And it was, you know, we were kind of like, well, you know, we have to cancel it, don't we? And the conference center was closed, and it, you know, kept getting closer and closer to the date. And so finally the camp reopened. And I guess we decided to go ahead with the conference, but there was still a lot of smoke, and people were trying to get masks that we could wear, and a lot of anxiety. But it turned out that the day of, or the day before the conference was to start, the main road actually opened so we could get to the camp and conference center. So that was a miracle right there. But we did have a 2-day, what we called pre-conference scheduled, where we toured the area, and we had to make several detours because the roads were closed. And anyway, through that tour, we were able to see a lot of the damage. And I know that I'm so bad at remembering names. There's a very famous waterfall right on the road, and that was just kind of scorched. All the trees around it. So it was very sad to see that. But the miracle of it all was that we were able to have our conference despite all that destruction.
And your story, certainly reminds us, as many of the other stories do, that in many respects we are at the mercies of the creation around us. That if something goes wrong, as we would call it wrong, that we can be in danger, and other people can be in danger, and the things that are important to us can be in danger. It can be pretty scary. I don't have any stories as dramatic as yours. I just have a childhood memory of being camping up in the Cascade Mountains one summer at a place called Scout Lake. And I just thought it was wonderful to be there. And my brothers and I were, swimming in the lake, and we were catching salamanders and stuff like that. But about the third day, we started seeing smoke, huge billows of smoke several miles away up in the mountains. And the next day, Dad packed us up in the car, and we left because, he, in an abundance of caution, didn't want to put us in the risk. But that kind of stuff can happen, and we have to be able to know what to do about it. All these stories bring up different thoughts and ideas. Bill's story gets us thinking about forest management policies, and Catherine's story reminds us of the power of community in crisis. Anna's story reminds us of the quickness, the speed at which fire can do damage and how it can do permanent damage. Priscilla's story reminds us that fire can be our friend and can be something enjoyable. One of the other things that I think about, and maybe it's because being at a point in life where I have grandkids, is wondering, in light of all this, the stuff that we see on the news about wildfires, the stories that each one of us has experiencing fire in one way or another, what have you been intentionally or unintentionally helping your children, your grandkids, the kids at church learn and know and appreciate about what it means to live here in this part of the state where wildfires are a hazard? What have you done? What thoughts have been on your mind? What interactions have you had?
I was just thinking of the simple act of trying to help your grandchild learn how to light a candle without burning their fingers. That in itself is a major accomplishment.
it kind of symbolizes one of these general themes in our stories, is that fire can be very dangerous and harmful, but if you know what you're doing, it can serve a purpose that we can enjoy and benefit from.
Reminds me of a conversation I had with a nephew and his family who live in California after one of the severe forest fires out there. They didn't live where they were personally threatened, but they certainly were aware of what was happening to other parts of their state. And the summer after one of the fires, they had gone to kind of look at the damage that had been caused. But what amazed them, my daughter says I'm a real Pollyanna, and I know sometimes I am, but the wildflowers were awe-inspiring. They took many, many pictures. And nature is amazing in terms of its ability to regenerate after sometimes horrible, horrible disasters of one sort or another.
Yeah, that is one of the wondrous things that we experience in the midst of being outside.
When you said
think I
that,
might-
Catherine, it reminded me of the fact that my grandchildren often like dandelions, and they will argue with you if you tell them it's a weed. It's not a weed, it's just beautiful. So
So do you get your kids up hiking and help them see the outdoors around here?
yeah, whenever they're here, that's big for them, just to walk the different trails. That's one of the things that they love about Montreat.
We've only lived here a year and a half, and my grandsons have only visited once, and it was kind of a short trip, and I was not real available, but they did come over to the house for a couple of hours, and we live on some property that has two creeks on it, and the back creek is the bigger one. It comes all the way through the, I guess you'd call it the subdivision here, coming out of the mountains. And as soon as they saw that creek, before I could even say anything, they were both in it. They were standing in the creek, and the older one had already crossed the creek over to the other bank, and the younger one was trying to make his way, and by the time their mom got there to scold them about getting their tennis shoes wet, it was too late. But I think about that a lot, because I was actually out in the creek today doing something in the water, and I thought about them and thought about the connections that we can have with being outside in this part of the world, that we wouldn't understand if we lived in a big city and didn't see water running naturally and didn't see trees growing naturally. We have at least 25 trees on our property that are 60 feet tall minimum. Some of them are 80 feet tall, you know, and stuff like that is, it can be awe-inspiring, as well as just enjoyable.
I can't remember the name of that wonderful children's park there in Montreat on the right as you're coming in, and the age limit I think is like 12 or something like that. It's just for younger children. I don't think that Art and I, my late husband and I, had visitors with young children ever that we didn't take them up there to play in that water. Those that were
Robert Lake Park.
in the deeper part, pardon?
Robert Lake Park. Robert Lake.
Yeah, yeah. And there were places where even 2-year-olds could play in the water safely, and then others that were a little bit more challenging.
That park was seriously reconfigured by another part of the forest when a flood came through there a couple of years ago.
Hmm.
Well, I think someone had told me that it was closed for a time.
It was for almost a year, but it's now reopened, I think.
That's good.
Although COVID shut it down again.
Mm. I remember visiting that park before my kids were married and thinking, boy, when I have grandchildren, I want to bring them here because I wanted to play in that water. No grandchildren this year, so I have to wait again.
My grandchildren know
Only
where
got
every
close
swimming
to-
hole is in Montreat.
I'm sorry, Priscilla, I didn't hear what you said.
I said,
Because I
my
was-
grandchildren know where every swimming hole is because they're a great variety. There are different depths, and there's places where you can walk across the rocks, and then places where you can really jump in and get under the water. And yeah, it really is a wonderful place for kids to explore and be safe
Is that in the creek or in the lake?
in the creek.
Huh.
Different areas of creeks.
You can't go in the lake anymore. When I was a kid, you could swim in the lake, but
Really?
Yeah.
I wondered about that today. I was walking around the lake and it just looked very inviting, but
it was very cold water, however.
yeah, it's cold. Not that I would know.
When my kids that are all adults now were young, we camped and hiked all over these mountains here, and they have the best memories of that. And most of my grandkids lived up in the Midwest right now, but everybody got together last summer and we took all of them. There were 15 of us, and we did all kinds of hiking, and it was just a wonderful experience for some of the kids. It was their first time really being out in these mountains, and they've just been hearing about it from their parents for years. So it was, it was fun to share that and to remember all the fun things that we did. And we learned a lot. I mean, anytime we were out, we were talking about, I don't know, we were always learning. We went on hikes with naturalists, anything that the parkway was doing, we would take place in and learn things. And anything I learned on the side, I was always teaching my kids. And so it was fun hiking with them because I heard them passing those things on to their kids as we're walking along. I think education is really important, like with the fires, just like with anything else that has a dangerous aspect with it, with kids, is to teach kids to respect it, to respect what it can do, how to, like Priscilla taught your kids how to build a fire. How do you do that safely? I think it's really important. And if they have a respect and a love for the land as well, they have a motivation for handling that well and for protecting it.
So on that note, that the comments from Anna, the other thing I was curious to spend a little time talking about is either what your congregations are doing or what you wish congregations would be doing in helping their own people, helping their communities appreciate all that Western North Carolina has to offer, and preserving and sustaining the natural beauty and the natural features here. What are your congregations doing, or what would you wish could be possible?
So I attend First Presbyterian downtown. And this month, October, we are having a church hike every Sunday afternoon, which, I was a little hesitant to participate in because of COVID and social distancing and everything, but we had our first hike last Sunday at in Old Fort. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this greenway. It's called Point Lookout. It was neat because it was an old road that had been paved. It had great views, and you could look without worrying about stumbling on a rock or tripping over a log because it was a paved road. But and this is something that I have wanted for my congregation to do, and I didn't have anything to do with this, so that's even better. And I would love for us to continue. Let's just do it year round. You can hike in Western North Carolina year round. So why just do it for a month? Maybe it's a trial.
I'd like to know where that is in Old Fort, like how to get there.
Yeah, so would I, because we caravanned and I just followed the car in front of me. But it's near Camp Greer, I can tell you that. So you pass Camp Greer, and then you take the first right.
You pass the turn off to Camp Greer.
Yeah, you take the turn off to Camp Greer, and then you pass Camp Greer and take the first right.
When you say you pass Camp Greer, there is a sign out on the road that you turn on the Camp Greer property, but you don't take that, right?
No.
You go beyond that. Yeah.
Right, and there's a road. Mm-hmm.
Black Mountain Church has done some Sunday hiking that has been on hold for a while, but yeah, being able to get out with people in the congregation, just.
Well, and I could also mention that I'm with the Creation Care Alliance of Western
George, here in Denver, we are working with 6 of our local colored churches, and we have a plan, a group of a few leaders from each of the churches. And the plan currently is to plant 2 trees on each of the campuses of the churches, and to help reforest the tremendous amount of trees that have been taken away from Denver by residential development. Now, these 2 trees have a special significance to us in that they will have signs on them that address social justice, racial justice, recognizing all people as equals, and that kind of thing. But there'll be a plaque on each of them. Unfortunately, we're currently struggling with the leadership of the group because one of the Black churches, their bishop has died, and he was a major driver in it. So we have a number of people that are getting together trying to fill that void. So, but we're going ahead with that project, and we'll plant, we as a large group, will plant a couple of trees on each of those campuses. This is part of a larger group in Denver that I don't believe is church related. I think it's related to the elementary schools, where they're trying to get the elementary schools to plant trees on their campuses to help reforest and cover for the loss of all the trees we have from the residential development. So that's ongoing, and we should see some major progress this next year.
Replace what has been cut down. Yeah.
I also go to Black Mountain Presbyterian Church, and we have a number of things going on that are very important, I think. One, our Earth Care Committee is now reading a wonderful book called Braiding Sweetgrass, written by a botanist who also is a Native American, and so she brings those perspectives to bear in the book as well. And then a member of our congregation, Jim Poling, sponsors both wildflower walks and bird walks whenever the weather is good enough. Usually we stop those sometime in the middle of the late fall and then don't resume again until spring. But those have been quite wonderful. He lets you know how severe the walk's going to be. So if you're a tottering old woman, you'll know to stay home on that day and wait for a walk that's going to be easier for those of us. We now have solar panels on our fellowship hall, and that's been both environmentally responsible and also has saved the church some money with heating bills. We have a very active Earth Care Committee. I think they too have been exploring some projects to replant trees in the area. You probably know more than I do about that, George.
Tamara's being quiet, but I know that the church she attends, Grace Covenant, has been pretty active in this area too. And they have a class going on right now using the book Drawdown which is called the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. So.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we have a community garden, and we have a butterfly garden. Someone on the Earth Care team suggested we start a butterfly garden kind of in the back of our church. So we've got that going, and we have solar panels. And we also have a gentleman who leads hikes, bird hikes, and they're not real intense, so that most, anyone can really attend them, but he hasn't been able to lead one recently, but he's led quite a few of them.
Well, it sounds like there are things going on in many congregations that connect people with the natural world around here. And hopefully, and it does sound like people appreciate it and that it helps, I would say, expand their understanding of what Christian witness means. We could get into all sorts of conversations about theology of earth stewardship and things like that. So I'm encouraged just to hear these, quick little snippets. And I hope that by hearing some of these things and sharing the stories about wildfires and what experiences we want our grandkids to have, that this gives us some encouragement that things like this not only matter, but that they are making a difference in the lives of people we know and hopefully people we don't know. Any final thoughts before we end the hour? Well, thank you again, everybody, for gathering. I hope that this has been enjoyable for you and thought-provoking, and we hope to do this again soon. The Earth Care team meets next week, and we'll be looking at scheduling and so forth. But I'm glad that each one of you have been able to be part of this tonight. I hope you enjoy the fall season. I hope you don't get flooded away from the rain that's coming this weekend.
Mhm.
And hope to see everybody again before too long.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Been good
Good
to
night.
see you.
Yes. Thanks,
Good
George.
night.
Night.
Good night.